Okay, I want to start off today with something personal. The first time I ever went to see a therapist, I was in a pretty dark place and I really just wanted somebody to talk to. And when I started to explain what was going on, I assumed it was really hard to follow because it's not that I don't have a brain and it's not because I wasn't really trying. It was just a lot and it was all tangled together. And I felt like I had to get every bit of it out just at once.
I think that happens to almost everybody that is sitting in that chair at that time. I believe that first session usually isn't the therapy, it's more like digging in for like excavation.
That's honestly where a lot of this episode comes from. Watching somebody or being that somebody, just trying to out or work through a mess of thoughts and not being able to find the one real thread that's underneath there.
You know what? And we consider that just thought soup. It's not a diagnosis, it's just what it looks like before anything really gets sorted out.
Yeah, and before we really get into it, we just want to say something real clear. Some of what we talk about on this show is going to sound kind of broad in theory, because we have built our own language around this over the years. And if it's new to some of you, it might take a little bit of practice to translate this into your actual life, but it's worth it.
Yeah, and look, here's why we think it's worth that practice. This stuff is already true whether we decide to name it or not. We just built vocabulary around it because naming it is what lets us actually use this stuff. It's changed our own internal states in ways we didn't even expect. We watched it do the same for other people. And these people, they gave it a real chance.
Yeah, so think of all this less like information and more like a challenge.
This is the nature of everything. Don't stay stuck.
Okay, so let's start with why this happens, because I don't think people give themselves enough credit here. This isn't laziness, there's an actual mechanism that goes along with this.
Preach, brother, preach.
All right, look, there's some research out there where they were studying waiters and they noticed something strange. The wait staff could remember a complicated order perfectly while it was still open, still in progress, and they're still working the table. The second the order was closed out and it was paid and that transaction was finished, the wait staff almost instantly forgot what was going on in that last table.
Yeah, so open tabs, stay loud.
Yeah, open things stay loud. So your brain treats unfinished stuff like open tabs, browser tabs, bar tabs, like any of these things as they're open, your brain refuses to close those. And it doesn't matter if that thing is small, like if it's a emails that you haven't answered or if it's something on the schedule that you haven't completed yet, all of those things, those occupy the same mental real estate as any like big crisis or big troublesome piece because your brain it sees unfinished as unfinished no matter the tab.
Well, that explains a whole lot about 2 a.m., like why my brain picks that exact moment to say, like, you didn't respond back to that
Mhm.
person in 2019.
Yeah, because to your brain it's still open as far as your brain's concerned, like you you never tapped out.
All right, so this actually connects to something from way before coin even existed as a framework. Before we had any of this language, we were just two guys trying to figure out how to be useful to each other.
You're absolutely right. You know, one of the first things we figured out was that venting to each other actually had value. And just getting some of that weight off before it built into something and snowballed into something crazy, that simply just helped.
Yeah, and eventually that turned into an idea that we still talk about. We had this idea for a venting journal.
Hmm.
It wouldn't have any structure. You didn't edit, hard. It was just pour out whatever's inside just to take the ammunition out of the gun, so to speak.
Yeah, and what we didn't really have, working at the time, we didn't really realize that venting was the beginning of the confirmation piece of coin because you really can organize anything. You just have to get it out of your head and somewhere that you can actually move the pieces around and look at it closely. What we didn't have, the vocabulary for at the time, but what we understand now is that you can't sort a mess that you can't see.
Here's something else that kind of ties into this. I heard this somewhere recently, and I don't remember who said it, but it really stuck with me. When we actually listen to our gut, when we really and pay attention to our intuition, we don't procrastinate nearly as much, and we don't carry nearly as much anxiety around about whatever that is.
Wait, say more about that then.
All right, so think about the stuff that you procrastinate on the worst. It's usually not the thing that you fully thought through and decided on. It's that thing that you've been avoiding thinking through it
Mm,
all. The anxiety isn't the task. The anxiety is that you haven't let yourself believe what your gut already knows about it, or you haven't thought through that.
yeah, that's fair. I struggled with procrastination for a long time in my life, even into my adult life. So yeah, procrastination. I can see what you're talking about. It's like the anxiety and I mean, they're basically again just an open tab, and it's not finished. So, and a lot of the reasons it's not finished and that tab still opens because you haven't looked at it. You hadn't you hadn't read what the tab's for yet.
Yeah, it's like something is just sitting there and you
Hmm.
can feel the weight of it, or you can kind of feel it looking at you or poking on you, But knowing the tab is open, it's not the same thing as actually sitting down and reviewing whatever's there.
Sure.
Reading it is what actually tells you what you're dealing with.
Sure, and I, and I know for those of us who like to go out to the bars every now and have a tab, until you read your tab, you don't really believe it, right?
Yeah, it was
It's
way higher than I thought.
it just so happens. Well, and to that though, until you believe that, you're just going to keep that tab open in your head, and it's just gonna sit there for indefinitely. Because I
Yeah,
mean,
and
let's be honest, if we didn't have to pay our bar tabs, I don't know that we'd ever look at it, right?
yeah, we'd secretly leave the bar. But I mean, really to have that stuff just sitting there and it's sitting there, that's exhausting. But it's also avoidable
Sure.
because the fix so often is not complicated. It's just uncomfortable.
Yeah. All right. So look, let's stop describing this. I think everybody's got it. Look, I'm going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to walk through an actual scenario together from start to finish. All right, so before we get back to everything, if any of this is hitting close to home, just know the book is built around exactly this that we're talking about. It's not a collection of quotes to feel good about. It's not a hype book. It actually teaches you how the coin framework is meant to work in your life. It gives you the vocabulary and a way of visualizing your own gaps so that you can actually execute the way you need to and not just, nodding along to a podcast once a week.
Yeah, and that's really a big difference. You can hear coin explained 100 times. The book is what actually gives you the tools to run through it yourself, confirm it, own it, be intentional, and change the nature of everything in your life. Find the book at thenatureofeverything.com. The link is in the show notes. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to play out a scenario so that you can watch how this thing sort of unfolds and watch it happen from the outside before you ever even run it on yourself. So Clint's going to play the person, the person with the problem.
I'm the person.
You're the person with the problem,
Mhm.
and I'm going to be the one that asks the questions, and we're going to walk it all the way through.
So so open scene, huh?
Yeah, open scene, stage left. Here comes Clint.
Lights up. All right, so I don't know. I've just lately I've just felt this anxiety. It's like a low level anxiety all week. Like there's this background noise, like this hum that's always there.
Okay, so don't explain that yet, but stay with it. What does that hum actually feel like?
And I don't know. It kind of feels like I'm behind.
Okay, behind on what?
Well, I don't really know. Just behind, dude.
Well, that's still pretty wide open, dude. Let's get specific. Are you feeling behind as a parent or as a partner or a friend, behind as a worker? Like, which one of those is actually where this is sitting?
All right. Well, I mean that actually that does help because I feel like it's sort of that workplace kind of thing. Like I've got deadlines. I keep not starting on these deadlines, and they're this particular deadline. It's been sitting there for probably 2 weeks, and I hadn't even started on it.
All right, you see, that's the move right there. That low level anxiety on its own, it just doesn't tell you anything to do. But I feel behind as a worker because of this specific deadline. Now we've got something in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, that's different than really how it felt in my head. I felt like like everything, like the everything, and it's actually just this one thing that's probably wearing at me the most, and I see that.
All right, so that's what confirming is. It's not fixing it yet. It's not deciding whose fault it is. It's just getting it out of the fog and into something specific, specific enough to look at. But here's the part that people stop too soon. You can say I feel behind as a worker and still not fully believe it. Like you've announced the tab that we talked about earlier, but you haven't read it yet.
Okay, so then how do I do that? How do I check that?
All right, so we're going to run it through three questions. We call them the three P's. Is it personal? Is it present? And is it pressing? So, personal, is this actually your problem?
Yeah, it's it's my problem. Sure, I mean, this is my task. I'm supposed to do this.
All right, so that seems simple enough. So, we can stop there on that. Present, is it happening right now? Or is this, is it borrowed from somewhere else?
Okay, so honestly, some of it is it's today. Yeah. The deadline is real. I know that this is due. I don't know, but to you, I don't know. Some of it feels older, like a story. I don't know. There's this other part of it just feels like it's older, like this same old story of, never being able to keep up and never being able to get things done. It's like there is stuff about today that's real about this deadline, but I don't know. Something feels like back in the background.
All right. So there's a line that I heard from Gabor Mate, who's on Theo Vaughn's podcast, and it stuck with me. He was talking about the imposter syndrome. And he said that the imposter syndrome, it's not a feeling, it's a belief. And the point that he made was you really can't argue with a feeling, but you can challenge a belief.
So that's basically what we're doing right now. We're not arguing with the feeling of being behind. We're simply like challenging this belief. I mean, to see if it's actually like true and real.
Yeah, I mean that belief part is something you carried from the past, right? Something that says I've always felt this. My mean uncle, Joe told me that I've never finish anything I
Mm,
start. That kind of
mhm.
thing. So the question we have to ask is what part of that feeling, what part of these thoughts that are floating around is the real deadline part, and which part of it is just that old tired narrative, just it got dressed with you this morning, but it's been around a long time.
Yeah, that makes sense because, like I said, the deadline is real. I know that this project is due. And to your point, the rest of it is just old belief that I mean, somebody has made me believe that I never keep up or I never finish or I'm bad about procrastination. So that's actually not about this job or even remotely about this particular project.
Yeah, and look, if you treat the thing as a whole and you own that whole thing as today's problem, and you're going to try to fix today's deadline plus a 15-year-old belief, like at the same time, that's why it's overwhelming. That's why it's not going to work.
Mm. The pressing piece of this, then, the deadline, yes, it's pressing. The old belief in this tired narrative, yeah, that's not. Unfortunately, though, that old belief, that old tired narrative that I need to shed, that's the one that's loud. I mean, it's not urgent. It's just loud.
All right. And that's where we talk about belief kind of being the bridge between confirming and owning. Belief, checking on that is the job. You could confirm a perfectly good sentence and still be aiming at the wrong problem if you didn't really check in with your gut, to figure out which part was actually true and which part was actually not.
Yeah, so basically once I actually believe it, then it's real. I recognize that it's present in its mind, it's today, it matters. Now then, because all of that is the belief piece of bridging from confirmation, now I get to move into ownership.
And look at it this way, to finally recognize that open tab and to want to confirm it, and then you get into owning it. Owning it isn't blame. And look, this really matters because blame and shame, they look backwards. Like, whose fault is this? And why did I let this slide? And look, all that's in the rearview mirror. Ownership looks forward. It's just, this is mine to move now.
Well, I mean, that makes sense because, like, owning this looks like admitting that I've let this deadline sit because simply starting this felt bigger than the actual problem really is, or the actual task even is. Starting it seems to be the hard part.
Yeah, and look, that's forward facing. Like nobody's handing out punishments. You're handing yourself a wheel.
Well, and it does make sense. Knowing that it's mine to make the next step with, and it's mine to move, and knowing how to actually progress with it. There's two sides of that. Like knowing that it's mine, and then knowing how to actually move it. Like those are two different things.
All right. So this is the part of coin that we've mentioned before, but we haven't really slowed down and analyzed it hard. Between owning something and being intentional about it, there's another bridge. And this bridge is called gap mapping. And look, inside of gap mapping, there's a distinction that we use a lot that's crossing the gap versus closing the gap. And to us, crossing is that planning process and visualizing and figuring out what you've actually got to work with. And closing the gap is the actual doing.
All right, so for this particular deadline piece, then crossing in this sense means taking on a stock. Like, what do I actually have? Like, how much time is really left? Who could help me get unstuck with the first step? So I need to like really consider what's worked before when a big task like this that I am responsible for. I need to figure out what's kept me frozen in the past, what's kept me stuck.
Yeah, and this is where a lot of people either skip crossing entirely or they just charge in exhausted and underprepared, or they just kind of cross this thing forever and ever and they never actually close it. They just keep imagining and daydreaming about it. They just keep taking inventory, but they never take this step to be intentional.
So realistically, the bridge here only it really only works if you truly get across it and you utilize and take that inventory honestly about what I have in place and what I can use and what I can do in order to finally get this gap closed.
I mean, that's what it means to be intentional. So being intentional is just doing those specific things that turned up in that assessment, not a personality overhaul. Like for the deadline you're talking about, maybe it's just blocking off an hour tomorrow morning before anything gets your attention, or texting one coworker and sort of saying like, "Hey, I'm kind of stuck here. Can you help?" Just small, specific, and doable things, but not just saying, like, I really want to get better. That's just like that vague self improvement crap. But just take the next two steps that came out of the actual thinking work that you just did.
So I mean that really is the loop. Simply what you're telling me is like take the anxiety and in its own way turn it into a sentence. Like name it, describe it, to tell me what it is. Check whether we actually like believe what we've just confirmed there. And if we do, and if we can honestly believe what we've confirmed, then now that becomes the piece that we have ownership in, that we can do something with, because that ownership has led to the plan or the gap map. And so if we have that, then we're able to put intentionality into place, because that for this particular scenario with this deadline, this plan has now given me two steps, which is block off an hour specifically for this tomorrow morning, and then talk to the folks that I know has dealt with this before. That's the loop, huh?
Yeah. And look, here's what's going to happen next. And I mean, you don't have to play the guy anymore,
All
right?
right, so
But
end scene. Are we
end
end
scene,
scene
end
now?
scene,
All right,
end
end
scene.
scene. All right.
All right. So you did brilliantly, by the
Thank
way.
you. Thank you.
Um,
That's my acting debut. I hope you loved it.
But look, here's what happens next is once you run this, you're going to start noticing the rest of your own noise differently, that low grade anxiety. You're going to catch it earlier instead of just trying to carry it around and carry it around. You're going to know it's there, and you're going to know that it's not shame that you're going to meet when you look at it. You're going to know like, okay, I need to create a bit of a process here because you know what that process feels like.
Yeah, and the beauty of this is that the way you start carrying these things, the way these things feel to you, that shifts as well. And it's not because you've somehow, again, it's not an overnight overhaul, right? So it's not that you've just simply fixed your whole life in one scenario, but you've got a way now to really consider that low hum anxiety, that stuff that's constantly running in the background. All those tabs are open. You know what those are, and now you recognize that there is an ability to take those steps to work with those.
So, like in the case of the hypothetical behind at work guy, when you trace it all the way back, behind, I feel behind at work, it's just a nice way of saying I feel stuck.
Yeah.
So let's use real words around that instead of just saying, I don't know how I feel stuck, or I feel anxious, or I'm
It's fine.
overwhelmed.
It's just
It's
fine.
it's fine. How are you today? You've got all
Fine.
that shit on you, and you're just like, it's fine.
I'm fine and I'm stuck.
So, look, here's what we want you to actually do this week. Take that low level anxiety, that hum, and don't stop at just that feeling. Push it one level further until you can name exactly where you feel stuck. Stuck as a parent, stuck as a partner, stuck as a friend, stuck as a worker. Land on one of those and say the whole sentence out loud, or better yet, write it down.
Yeah, and we recognize, and you should too, that being that specific about it, it really is, it's genuinely hard to get to because most of us can feel that something's off, and we feel that long before we can actually put it into words and say what it is. But if you can get to the point where you can say, hey, this is what this actually is, this is what I'm feeling, and this is the dynamic of it, these are the pieces parts of it, that's how you find that true progress. That's how you start making those integral steps. Because before you can get to the rest of the framework, you really have to know and honestly believe, confirm what that is that's going on with you.
And look, if you know somebody who's been saying like they're fine all week and they're clearly not fine, like send them this podcast.
Yeah.
And not because there's anything wrong with them, but because they're probably just stuck somewhere that they haven't named yet.
And look, if this is you and you want help going deeper and figuring out what that one sentence may be for you, that's what a coin session is for. Not because you're broken, not because there's anything necessarily wrong, because sometimes you just need somebody else holding that mirror up while you find the actual words.
And look, a session isn't us handing you a worksheet. It's you talking directly with us while we walk through this process and ask those questions in real time. We're going to help you get to what actually needs to be confirmed and what's actually yours to own, and what being intentional might look like specifically for you, and what changing the nature of your life could actually mean once you've done that work. So visit thenatureofeverything.com and learn more about that opportunity.
All right, so that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed my acting.
It was so
debut.
good.
Yeah.
Golden Globe, brother.
Yeah, I really expect some awards for this, just so you know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but seriously, I hope that's helpful to kind of see how the coin framework is built to work and how you can use it in your own life. And again, if you have more questions, just visit the website. We'd love to hear from you. But until then, don't stay stuck.
Before you go, just know it's time. Time to connect. Time to change the nature of everything. Find us at thenatureofeverything.com and don't stay stuck.